Um, my name is Matthew, and welcome to this back to school webinar. Um, I am a social media intern at Urban Restoration Counseling Center, which is in San Diego, California, and I'm here to present our two lovely panelists who are going to talk to us a little bit more about what it means to go back to school, especially as a parent of color. And we have an educator on the panel, and we also have a therapist on the panel who will kind of talk to us through many of the questions that we have. So let's go ahead and first start with introductions. Zenani, if you could introduce yourself a little bit, maybe your pronouns, where you're from, and what you currently do.
Okay. Hi, I'm Zenani Mzube, she, her, and I am an educator. I taught high school English for almost 15 years, and I now have a small educational consulting business called Rest Educational Consulting. And part of my business involves tutoring. The other part involves designing curriculum, and the other part actually will relate to what we're going to be discussing today, which is how to help parents navigate the management of their child's learning. I don't want to call it homeschooling because it's not that. It really is managing their child's learning. So.
Thank you so much. Shanelle, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so thank you, Matthew. Hey, Zenani.
Hey.
So I'm Shanelle D. Johnson, licensed marriage and family therapist. I am the Chief Operations Officer of Urban Restoration Counseling Center. I'm a therapist and I'm a mom. So, I'm excited about this conversation because I have two kids, a middle schooler and an elementary schooler that will be returning to school this year, distance learning. And I'm kind of freaking out. They go back to school on the 19th, which is like next week, and got a desk, got some desks and some pens. But outside of that, I'm kind of not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing with these kids. And so I'm definitely looking forward to this call to, as a parent, learn what I'm supposed to do, but also I can speak to, as a therapist, like the mental health component of what parents may be feeling as well as what kids may be feeling.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Shanelle. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the first question. Oh, sorry, my pronouns are he, him, by the way. Let's go ahead and get started with the first question. The first question is social and emotional health, which ties into the overall well-being of one's mentality and health, is undeniably important during times like the present. What do you think are the best ways to begin to identify and cultivate mechanisms to support a healthy mindset for both parents and for students?
Okay, Shanelle, get us started.
I'm gonna take that one. Right? Okay, so the social emotional health of child and parent are always important, right? But I think more now than ever, what we're seeing is parents are having more interaction with their kids. Families are having more interaction with each other now than ever before. Prior to COVID, parents were out at home 8 hours a day. Kids were out of the home 8 hours a day. If you had, before school and after school care, then maybe even 10 hours a day, kids were out of the home. And so there was a very small window of interaction, a very small window of social, emotional part. And it really, all of it was combined with, it's your social, emotional well-being around after school, evening, eating dinner, and going home. And going to bed. Right? Like that was the component of it. And so now what we're seeing is the shift where parents and children and families are together all day long. Like all day long, right? And so what we're learning now as parents, we're learning like, man, I really like, wait, you have all of this emotion all day?
All day.
Right? All day long, you have all these different emotions. Like, I didn't know you had so many emotions around reading or different emotions around math or, where the teachers were the ones initially, the ones that were taking on that. So like, you know, if my son was bad at math or was struggling with math and he was having meltdowns, I didn't know that he was having meltdowns because I was at work. It was the teacher that was dealing with his mental health around math or his mental health around reading. And so now what's happening is parents are now being forced to see their children all day long and see the wave of emotions that they go through around schooling and around life, you know? And so I think parents are really shocked, one, and here's the reason why. Culturally, we don't speak emotional literacy, right? So I think parents are shocked because their kids are having this wave of emotion and they don't even know how to help their children communicate what's going on with you, right? And so kids don't have the language because the parents don't have the language. So I think one of the things that have to happen first or simultaneously, right? So it's not a linear process, but one of the things I think we have to do is we have to begin to speak emotional literacy in our houses now, right? We have to be able to put names to feelings, right? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling hungry, right? So I think that's one of the things that I think we have to begin to see is like this emotional literacy that needs to be, sorry, I'm distracted. My kids are home now, right? And so I've been working from home all day with kids in the background. Mom, can I have a pop? Mom, can I have a soda? Mom, can I go outside? Mom, he touched me. He's breathing. Mom, can I? And I'm just like, so you know I'm trying to work, right? Like, and so that's another part, right? And so then the parents on the other part, so kids are having these waves of emotions and they have to figure out like, okay, what do I do? How do I communicate this? Parents have to help figure out like John was wrong, right? Like you're crying. Why are you crying? I don't understand. It's the computer. Why every time you get in front of the computer, you cry? I don't understand. So parents are having to figure out how to navigate that, as well as parents are having to figure out what are we doing with our own emotions, right? Because listen, I love my babies with every part of my being. But I'll tell you, when my son has a meltdown around math, I have a meltdown around math, right? And it's not because I don't know math, right? Because I'm pretty good at math. However, there are some parents who aren't good at math, so that's a whole different conversation, right? Yeah. Like now I know math, but here's the crazy part. My kids speak Spanish. My kids go to Spanish school. So yes, I may know math. I may know 1 + 1 is 2, right? But I don't know how to do it in Spanish. And so when my baby has a meltdown around math, I have a meltdown around math because I'm like, oh, what? You don't know what you're supposed to be doing? Well, I surely don't know because I don't speak the language. At least you understand Spanish, right? And so I have to figure out like what I want to do with my emotions and how to manage my own emotions so that I can help him manage his own emotions. And I don't think, you know, I'll be honest, day 4 of COVID, the kids coming home last year, I was writing my son's teachers apology letters. Like, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry, Miss Jones. I did not know this is what you were dealing with every day. Yeah. Like, I owe you like money. Like, can I put some gas in your car? Because this is extra. Right? Like, this is extra. And so what's happening as parents, this is what we're seeing. Like, we really are seeing what the teachers go through every single day. And I'll just tell you this. Listen, y'all. This is what I go through with my one child. My one child. Poor Miss Jones has 25 of these people in her class. And so I feel like I really had an under appreciation for what my children's teachers go through every single day. I will be very honest and say that, right? That I had a serious under appreciation for them. And knowing that each child, you know, it's on different spectrums, right? So like, and different learning curves and different emotional curves and all, like it's a lot in management of dealing with their emotional well-being of 25 kids. Like, listen, these teachers need a raise. Can we put some money together and give these teachers some raises? Because they are really putting in some real work every single day. My hat goes off to you, Zenani. Bravo Zulu, girl. Round of applause, because y'all doing it.
Oh yes, each and every day. I completely agree with you regarding the social emotional piece and being able to identify feelings. The child must be able to identify feelings. The parent also must be able to identify feelings. And I'd like to go the practical route with that, because there's that practical route. And the practical route involves a check-in. And so I would say that at the beginning of the day, the beginning of the time where your child is going to sit down wherever in the house now and engage in online learning, check in with your child, because checking in with your child is checking in with yourself. Parents are experiencing a lot of crazy emotions right now, that have to do with finances, that have to do with time, also having to do with health. There's so many things going on in households that, educators are unaware of. And I think that the most telling of this is the horrible event that happened a few days ago with the 10-year-old little girl who was, on a Zoom class meeting, and her mother was shot to death by an ex-boyfriend. And so when we think about what's happening with children and we think about what's happening with parents, we have to also be cognizant of, what happens when we ask children to sign in, and they have no control over their environment. But I also see this as an opportunity.
There's a woman that I know that she's a young mom, like under 25, and she got like 5 kids, right? And I think in theory, like, listen, and I joke and I make light of all of these situations, right? But I think to myself, like a young mom with 5 kids, right? Various ages. Anybody with 5 kids is struggling.
Oh, for real.
Anybody.
That is.
You could be the best mom ever, and you're struggling because 5 kids is a lot to manage, and especially if they're varying ages. If you got a high school and a middle school and elementary school, those are way different social, emotional, ages and health and needs and things like that, right? But I think we're asking these kids to go home and do this learning, but we're not paying it. What no one's asking is, your family prepared to do this learning?
Absolutely.
Right? Like, there are a lot of our children that, live in some really complicated circumstances, some really trying circumstances, some circumstances where they really needed to go to school to get a break from the craziness of their households.
Absolutely.
Circumstances,
Absolutely. And I talk to students like that all the time. Students
right.
who were actually grateful to be at school, and food insecurity aside, there was the environment, this feeling of structure for a lot of students, this feeling that, okay, this is a normal, this is my normal part of the day. That's for me, that, I get to connect with my friends. I get to just lean in and learn and think about school. In March, when schools closed, I had one student who actually was concerned because there were 12 people in his 3-bedroom, home. And so there was the sharing of Zoom, there was the sharing of the laptops, there was the Wi-Fi access, there was the noise in the background, having no place to lean in. And here we are, we're asking students to lean in from their homes for, I know for my classes, they were an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm expecting you to show up. I will say this, because I believe that because this is out of our control, we are going to have to be creative. We're going to have to look at this in ways that, and when I say this, I mean school. And this is why I believe that it's an opportunity, because honestly, things weren't perfect in school. And so I believe that this is a call to action for parents. And I know a lot of parents might not want to hear this, but this is what it is. I also believe that this is a call to action for educators, because what we're seeing, online is indicative of what we were seeing in schools. And there were some things clearly that need to change. But when we think about the social, emotional part for parents and children, I believe it begins with the check-in. It begins with, asking your child, teaching your child that emotional literacy, as Shanelle said, and asking, hey, how are you feeling? And telling your child, sharing with your child how you're feeling.
Absolutely.
Because your children can sense your stress anyway. You might as well be straight up, and you can use simple words. You can use simple words like mommy's worried today, because what that also allows your child to do is to understand that, okay, mom has a lot on her plate right now, but mom cares enough about you to check in with you. So there's this exchange, and that's what makes family, right? Is being honest and working together. And so that's where it begins. It begins with a simple check-in. How are you feeling? What do you need? How will you feel once you get what you need? And what can I do to help you? Because also, once you do that, once you begin to use that kind of language, your child is going to feel respected and seen. Your child is going to probably be more open to, sitting down and doing the work. And we'll talk more, about that, but I know we're on the social emotional part right now. But yeah, it really does come down to a very simple 5-minute check-in that you can do at the beginning of the day, or at the beginning of the learning time, and at the end of the work time, to just, say, I see you, and I know this is difficult, and we're going to get through this. And I truly believe that when you are the parent, when you are the teacher, you are the adult in the room. It doesn't mean that you're, having to be condescending or talk down to the child, but you do have to understand your place. So really, parents and teachers right now, you can't afford to freak out. Your child is already freaking out. So you have to be the voice of reason. So where does that begin? That begins with a simple check-in and conversation, and teaching them how to relate. And that might mean that, parents might have some remediation themselves, because as Shanelle pointed out too, a lot of parents don't have the language. That means they need to learn the language. That means also that teachers need to learn the language. Everybody needs to learn the language.
I love it. It's so interesting because I think as parents, I remember being adults. I know this is crazy, it's kind of off topic, but not really. So I remember being adult, right? I remember being pregnant with my first, it was after I had the baby. I had my first son. I remember freaking out. I was a single mom. I was in San Diego. I was doing this by myself, right? And I remember calling my mom one day. At the time, she lived like in Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, somewhere in there. And I remember calling her saying, Mom, I'm really struggling. I don't know. How did you do all of this? How did you be a single mom and go to work and do all this stuff and not like have meltdowns and not like lose it and stuff? And she said, oh no, I did. And so it was the first time that, and I know it was just one of the first times that I clearly remember realizing that I felt really normal in what I was feeling, and I think as we go through this process of trying to figure out what distance learning looks like, I think as parents, it's okay to say to our children, I don't really know how to do this.
Absolutely.
So that the kids can feel normal, like, well, you don't know how to do it either? Well, that makes sense because I don't know how to do this.
Absolutely.
And it kind of normalizes this process. So I think as parents, the one thing I can say is my kids really really seem to like respect when I just share my emotions with them and just say, you know what, right now, guys, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And then I can model for them what to do with feeling overwhelmed, right? Like, you know what, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I need to tap out and take a break.
Exactly,
You know?
because the reality is you're going to share your feelings with your child either way. So you can pay now or pay later. When, you know, you can pay now by, you know, having that calm conversation with your child or that check-in with your child, or you can blow up later. But eventually, either way is gonna happen. So why not, you know, be the adult and head it off at the pass and make some decisions? And I think that this is what it comes down to, right? Is making a choice or making, you know, certain choices that will help you to navigate this pandemic, navigate, you know, everything that's happening within your home, navigate the communication that's needed with your child's teachers. These things are doable. They really are.
I love the fact that you said make a choice, right? Because it makes me realize, as a parent, you know, I realize, oh, I do have some control in this.
You have all the control. You know what I've started calling parents? I've started calling them the OOIC, the original one in charge. You're already in charge. And I think parents forget this because, going back to your point, you know, you send your child off to school, and so your children are with other adults all day. You forget you're not like the background player. You are the one who is in charge. You make all these decisions all the time, all day, every day. You do. They're financial decisions, their time management, they come down to what's going to be for dinner. You make all these decisions. And so it does come down to the fact that parents need to understand that they have the original power. And most parents do know their children well enough to facilitate the learning from home. And I know it's hard. And I know it's particularly hard for parents who don't get to work from home. Like you have the opportunity to work from home. And working from home is a real privilege. And I know we're going to talk about that too. But, you know, it's still, it's something that has to be done. And parents forget that they're creative, especially single parents. I was a divorced parent. So, you know, oh my gosh, the creativity that would come out, I'd be like, wow, where did that come from? Where did that good idea come from? You're a diva. And it's true.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing, both of you guys. I mean, I think I only have very minimal experience in kind of the social emotional space, but I can definitely count times where I've talked to kids in like a counseling setting where they wish that their parents could emotionally support them more. And I think that I really see that like teachers kind of take on that social and emotional work. And I know it's particularly hard for like it's a lot of responsibility for a teacher. Like you're also like, not only do you have to teach curriculum and all this content, but you also have to teach like teach them how to like be people, like like their social emotional skills, right? So yeah, I definitely like see a lot of what you're saying, and kind of one big part of that I think we don't really have a discussion enough about is race, and this kind of leads into the next question. Race plays an undeniably big role in every aspect of any person's life. Could you guys expand a bit on how race plays a role in a global pandemic, especially in terms of back to school and with childcare?
So I guess can we speak back to, let me pull back for a second and speak about like the social economic status of a person, right? Because I think that kind of coincides sometimes, not all the times, but it coincides with race. Oftentimes, our minority communities, our Black and Brown communities, some of our Asian communities are of lower social economic status, which means that we work lower paying jobs, right? We work jobs with odd hours. We might work graveyard shifts. We might work overnights. We might work a split 11 to 3. And so what that means is that we require, we require someone to be with our child in the morning before, if we have to go to school early, right? If we have to go to work early, that means we require that we drop our kids off at the daycare, we drop our kids off at extended day, because we have to be to school, we have to be to work super early, right? But it also means sometimes that we need the after school care, right? So we drop our kids off the kids go to after school care 6 to 6. Some of our parents drop their kids off at school at 6 o'clock in the morning and they don't pick them up till 6 o'clock in the evening, right? That's 12 hours that your child is out of the home. And so your child eats breakfast, eats lunch, and almost eats dinner there, right? Eats all the snacks. And so what we're seeing now, as far as race is concerned, is that we're seeing that Black and Brown communities are really, struggling. Black and Brown communities, especially our communities of lower socioeconomic status, when I have to, if I work a 8 to 3, maybe I'm a service worker, right? I'm a service worker. I work 8 to 3. My child is distance learning from home, but my child isn't old enough to stay home by himself, right? Maybe my children are 10, 9, and 5. Right? So I had 3 children that's in elementary school, and none of them are old enough to stay home by themselves. And I have to be at work from 8 to 3.
Yep.
Who's taking care of my child for me? Who's taking care of my 3 children for me during the COVID pandemic, and making sure that they're going to school, making sure that they're doing the distance learning? And so race, I think, is what we see is that our Black and Brown communities are probably the ones that are hit hardest by this COVID and get hit hardest by, by this pandemic, because we just don't have the extra means. We don't have the extra income to be able to hire nannies, right? Like I listened to a segment on NPR the other day, and they were talking about how there's huge push right now, huge influx of people wanting nannies and wanting living nannies. There's a special word for them. I can't think of what it's called. It's a fancy word for a living nanny. And I thought to myself, Au
pair.
Yeah, what's the word?
Au pair. Mm-hmm.
Au pair, right? I was like, that's fancy, right? Like with the privilege that you have to be able to hire someone to come in, live in your home, that means your house needs to be big enough for you to be able to have an extra space for this whole person to live, right? And to help take care of your children. And so what we're seeing now is we see a lot of, communal living starting to come back in the Black and Brown communities, because we don't have a choice, right? Like, so when my neighbor goes to work overnight, and she works from 11 to 7 in the morning, or she gets home at like 9:30 after she does all the stuff and closes down, then I'm with her child, or her child is coming to my house in the morning to do schoolwork. Right? Because he struggles with reading, and we know that he's not going to do the reading by himself. So he comes over, and so we're seeing a lot more communal coming back together. We're seeing like parents helping parents, and grandparents probably more now than ever, like, hey, grandpa, grandma, can you help somehow, some way? Even if you just watch the babies in the morning from the time I leave to go to work at 7 until 9 o'clock. And then, the neighbor will come over in the morning and finish so I think that's what we have to see us joining together, the communities joining together to get through this, which is completely opposite of what we want to happen when it comes to this COVID pandemic, right? Because we want to create distance, but this whole pandemic is forcing us to come together because we don't have a choice. Black and Brown communities don't have a choice. We have to work. If we don't work, we don't eat.
Absolutely.
It's just that simple. Right? We don't have the extra where dad can go off to work and mom can stay home, or we can live in this sanitized environment. You just don't have those privileges in Black and Brown communities. And so, like, our kids are still put at risk. Our families are still put at risk because we have to bring our families together. We have to bring our communities together in order to make sure that we get through this together, that we make sure that we stay alive. And so that may mean exposing you to, maybe a pandemic. I have no idea.
Yeah. And we're probably also going to see more underground situations within our communities too, where, people are teaching, children. I know that on the Black San Diego business page, there was a conversation among some teachers regarding what they're doing within their communities. And there was this one teacher, and she said that she's tutoring the middle school children in her apartment building. So there are going to be some positive things, but as you said too, yeah, we're gonna be exposing ourselves, and whenever we hear about the cases of the virus, it's usually us, and that is unfortunate. We're also going to see, unfortunately, the issue of older siblings having to care for younger siblings. So that means that they're not going to be online getting their learning. They're not going to, complete their homework. And even this past spring, we saw that a lot of students were not online when they were supposed to be showing up.
Yep.
But I'm also going to say that when we talk about race, what I think about is cultural competency, the competence of teachers and administrators and school districts, because you want these children to show up. You want them to turn on their video feature. You want them to show up and sit at their kitchen table or at their desk or whatever. And you want them to be engaged and be alert and be on time and have all their materials as if they were in the classroom. But there are so many teachers who show up to the physical building as well as to these screens, and they have no cultural competence. They don't understand or value diversity. They don't understand that there are things that are going on, in brown people's homes and Black people's homes that you don't get because you're not trying to get it, because you haven't even bothered to make yourself knowledgeable about other cultures. And I think that this is such, and I said this when we found out about the pandemic, that this is a spiritual crisis. And so beneath the spiritual crisis, right, we have all of these social crises. And what it's doing is it's revealing what we need to do and how we need to treat and see our children. And so there are so many things that have been happening in physical classrooms, with behavior, and not just the child's behavior, but the teacher's behavior. And so now we're asking those same teachers, and this is not, to blast teachers, because, I consider myself a teacher still. It's not about that, but it is to ask that we use this as an opportunity to really see our students. Because if we weren't doing that in the classroom, now they don't have to show up. Like if my parent goes to work, my parent goes to work, and I'm left here with my laptop, and I know that this history teacher or this English teacher or this math teacher can't stand me, why would I show up? Why would I show up online when I don't have to? School now has to be compelling, and especially for children of color, because this is often what happens, often in the classroom, they're the ones who are sent to the principal's office or to the counselor's office, right? But where are you going to send them now? If they act out, if a child shows up in your Zoom class meeting, where are you going to send them? You're going to have to learn to relate to them in different ways. And that becomes, a matter of cultural competence. It really does. So when I think about race, I think about how are we going to make ourselves as adults, as educators, more sensitive, more culturally sensitive to what's happening with our children and our parents? What are we going to do?
I definitely think what you said is really interesting. One point that is like mildly off topic almost. I was reading something and it was about the education system and how teachers are testing their students, and how that has shifted over the past few decades. Um, Before we would kind of like the teaching strategy was almost we test students so we get an understanding of their knowledge and what they know and kind of assess like what they're doing. But now it's kind of transitioned more into testing the teacher almost, I would say. Like it would kind of test the teacher and like how are they getting through to their students, or the students understanding these concepts and grasping all this material, so that when I test this material, like they get it, you know what I mean? They can show that they've understood the material that I taught. And kind of just bringing this back to kind of strategies in order to support your student. Um, I just wanted to ask both of you guys if you guys had any like specific strategies that parents of color or um, yeah, parents of color can specifically work with their students in order to support them, just because um, parents of color don't have those same advantages of having that kind of quiet area or having that, you know, that space, and how to have that kind of communication with the teacher, because especially right now it may be really hard to have that communication with the teacher that's supposed to be teaching your child.
Absolutely. Again, I'm going to say that I'm going to say that parents are going to have to draw upon their existing creativity. I think that this is really going to be important. And I will say that Black and Brown parents, Asian parents, you know, I know this as an educator, that parents of color tend to be really creative. They tend to be so resilient. They know some things. And I think that unfortunately, the pandemic and all that's happening with the pandemic is just compounding the stress. And so it might be difficult to really recognize the creativity that's there, the, you know, the flexibility that's there, because, you know, I'm sure that, you know, as parents, you're thinking, you know, I don't know what to do. And then there's so much out there, like on social media and everywhere, that just, and then we've got, you know, the person in the White House. There's so much that's happening that it's hard to think, okay, I've got to sit down and I've got to make a plan. So I would say that this is an opportunity to draw upon the creativity. This is also an opportunity to if you don't necessarily have with your family, and granted, you know, a lot of us don't, because if we never learned it, where would we have gotten it, right? Where would we gotten, you know, the idea of sitting down to make a plan? So I have a component of my business that's called the Calm Experience. And with that comes the acronym of a check-in, an agenda, the lesson, and the management. And I will say again that parents, you are not required to homeschool your child. Homeschooling means that you are actually teaching. You're not teaching. Your child needs to show up to these, you know, these Zoom class meetings for that and get the lesson. Your job is to manage the learning time. And so I hear what you're saying, Matthew, about not having that environment for your child. And there's so many parents who they don't have that, that room or whatever, that quiet place. And trust me, I've had students who have told me they've had to study in the bathroom after everybody's gone to bed. They've had to go into that little closet and leave it cracked so that they could, write that essay because, they didn't want to disappoint me, So I understand that, there are all kinds of circumstances in our homes, but I guess I would begin there. Shanelle said that, she went out and she bought those desks and those chairs, she's got the pencils, she's ready to rock and roll in a way, right?
Right.
But
and so that was one of the things that was important to me, was me to create an environment for the boys so that they can learn, because after having COVID, after had an experience last year with those 3 months, we were doing homework on the couch, on the beds, at the tables, on the floor, outside, and I love the flexibility in it, right? I did. And so I recognize that some days you need to be able to move away from the desk, and some days you need to be able to lay across the floor, because that's just one of them days. Because sometimes the only way to get through it is on the floor, half crying, half falling out, and just powering through it, right? And so I get that, and I wanted to allow my kids the flexibility of that, but I also wanted to allow them I wanted to be able to create a space that was specifically theirs and specifically for them. And I know that, not everybody has that ability. So again, I recognize my privilege in the situation, right?
Right. Yeah. And so everybody doesn't have that. But what you do have, to Shanelle's point, is, you do have some chairs.
Absolutely.
Most of us have some places to sit in our homes. Mm-hmm. And even if it is on the floor, I think it's about the consistency. Mm-hmm. It's about creating the consistency. The consistency comes in the agenda. So to have an agenda for your child, forget about the school's agenda. That's their thing. You want to create an agenda for your child's learning, because you are the boss of your home. Mm-hmm. And so in doing that, you're setting up a space for how long your child is going to work each day, because contrary to popular belief, when children go to school, they're not sitting down for 6 hours. They might be there for 6 hours, but they're not sitting down the whole time. So parents don't have to feel like they have to sequester their child in that way. That's not necessary. Just yesterday, as a matter of fact, I was tutoring, and the young lady that I was tutoring, we had a conversation about the fact that she's returned to school now. And we talked about how much time she spends doing work, actual work, that she sits down and she's doing actual work. And she said that she's doing maybe 10 minutes, and then she gets on her phone. And then she's on her phone for 20 minutes. And then she'll go back to, the actual work. And so, because I understand that many teenagers have a short attention span, and I know that for her, this might be necessary, I said, why don't we flip it? And so doing things like that, flipping the time that you actually work, giving your child chunking time. So chunking time would be this. With the young lady yesterday, I suggested that she work for 20 minutes uninterrupted. 20 minutes. 20 minutes is doable for her. And then she can have 5 to 7 minutes to actually be on her phone, but she sets the timer and then she's back to work. And so she's doing this for a couple of hours to get the work completed until she finds her flow. One of the things that I think needs to happen with parents and teachers is to be patient with students, because they have to find their flow. Now that they're working from home, they're not sitting at the desk, they don't have to ask to go to the bathroom, they can get up and go, but they have to know they have to learn how to manage their time. And so parents have to teach children how to manage their time. And if you teach your child how to manage his or her time, then you know what? You're going to have more time. that frees you up. And so even if you're not thinking about the child in that way, think about yourself. You want to free yourself up. So if you're at home working or if you're at home cooking, you want your child to be able to do their work. So the agenda is so important. The next part is the lesson, and that is.
Wait, can I interrupt? Can I ask a question for a second?
Sure.
Well, because one of the things, and this is me as a parent, right? Like I'm a therapist, but I'm also a parent. So one of the things that I'm curious about is you said, hey, Shanelle, this is not just about the plan for the school. This is the plan for the family. This is how are you going to structure your kids' time? And so I want to make sure I got it, right? So that's me sitting down, checking in with my kids in the morning. What do you guys got going on for today? How are you feeling first? How are you feeling about the day? What do you need in order to be successful with the day, right? Well, I'm feeling a little grumpy, Mom. Maybe I may need some extra snacks today, right? Okay, cool. Extra snacks, got it, right? And then as my kid goes through, then we create a plan together. Like I guess I'm curious to know about the process, right? So is this something that we do every single day? We create the plan, or is the plan pretty consistent? Like we already have like what the agenda is going to be. We're going to be, one child may be, chunking for 30 minutes and then 10 minutes and 30 and 10. And another child may do it for, 20 and 10. And can I stop there for a second? Because I know some of us parents have kids at different ages, right? And so do you have any recommendations about, if we were going to use this chunking mechanism or technique, do you have any recommendations on like timing gaps for maybe like a first grader, a third grader, because that's, maybe a kindergarten and a first grader versus like a third and a fourth grader in the middle school and in the high school?
I think, I don't teach the little ones, but I do tutor one of, the little ones. And I would say that the chunking really, really is important with the smaller ones. And I would even say this is a little bit off topic, but not so much. One of the things that I think when good homeschooling goes well, one of the things that happens with good homeschooling is the fact that children get out. Go outside. Let your child go outside. Fresh air is going to do everybody a lot of good. So one of the things that I think when you're thinking about the chunking throughout the day is you're thinking about, okay, maybe this break that my child is going to take has nothing to do with being on a phone or playing, the video game, but it has to do with going outside. It's good for their brains. It's good for their bodies. They're not getting recess, right? Mm-hmm. So especially with these younger ones, you want to think about recess. You want to think about, take them outside. And even if it's the older sibling, so you have an older sibling, maybe they can take one of those breaks together and the older sibling can take the younger one outside. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. To your question about the agenda, mm-hmm. When I was a single mom, I'm going to have to use some profanity here, but when I was a single mom, my sons and I, we had what was called a bitch and moan meeting once a month, one Saturday a month. And, we would talk about, who's going to do what, who didn't do what they were supposed to do in terms of chores, because, my sons are 2 years apart. So of course, somebody was always being blamed. If it wasn't me, it was one of them. So, but we would have these meetings, and, so much of the meeting had to do with just checking in. And I knew nothing about restorative practices then. I knew nothing about checking in then. I just knew that we were having a conversation because it helped my home to just, run smoothly. So I think that if you start out by planning with your child or your children and you involve them in creating the agenda, then you don't have to do this a lot. And what it does is it helps children to problem solve. It helps them to take on responsibility, but it also helps them to become accountable. A lot of the a lot of the strategies that I have for parents, they come from either, my own parenting, but honestly, more from the classroom. For instance, at the beginning of the year, I don't make rules for children, for my students. We make the rules together. And we make the rules together because I figured out that if we make the rules together, when somebody breaks a rule, then I can say, but you said this was your rule, right? And so the same thing happens with parents and children. You want to involve them in the process. And I know it might seem like you're giving up a lot of power, but you're actually not. You're empowering them, but you're also allowing for the accountability factor at the end. So I would say you have these meetings, and maybe you have a meeting once a month to check in regarding the agenda. But the agenda is the agenda. Once you have the meeting, that first meeting, then the agenda is the agenda for the week. And at that point, it's about being accountable and about being consistent. So the parents have to be consistent, the child has to be accountable.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing, Zenani. We are towards the end of our webinar discussion for today. It's like the last 5 minutes of our discussion. So I kind of just wanted to get your final thoughts on everything. The one question that we had was, what is the biggest piece of advice or words of wisdom that you could give to parents right now, just during this time, and this will be our wrap-up question for today.
Trust yourselves. You are the one in charge. You're the original one in charge. Trust yourselves. Trust that whatever happens outside of your environment, in your environment, you are the one in charge. And go outside. Take your children outside. I love, love, love when I take evening walks and I see families walking. Go outside. Take your children outside. It's going to benefit everybody.
I think if I could offer any piece of advice, it would be that to continue to extend yourself grace. Little kids are little humans. And just as parents have a large variety of emotions, so do little kids. And I think oftentimes as parents, we get into the habits of negating and validating a child's feelings because they're children and they don't know. But a child knows. They may not have the language to express, right? And that's, as parents, that's our job, is to help teach and cultivate language so that they know how to express themselves, and to help teach and cultivate what to do and how to behave when I feel this way, right? But a child has multiple feelings, a range of emotions. And so I think the one thing I can offer is that to give yourselves some break, some credits, just extend yourself some grace, and know that just like you're gonna go through a wave of emotions, so do your children. And if you could do anything this year, I would say to spend the time working on the relationship, right? Like the children can learn and they can get caught up, they could do tutoring, they could do all types of things to get caught up on in the schoolwork. But I think it's important that this year, that this time we spend on cultivating the relationships between parent and children and between families. I don't know if we'll ever have another opportunity like this again, where we'll be this close knit as a family unit. And so I think this is a time that we have to seize it. We have to seize the opportunity to build our relationships, to restore some of our family units, right? To even if it's our family unit of choice, right? Because there are a lot of people who have families of choice, not families of origin. And so this is the time I think that we should spend some time building relationships. And if that means that we don't get math work done today, right? Because I've spent time listening to you and hearing you and understanding that you're just burnt out on math, then it's worth it. It's worth pausing on the math to preserve the relationship, because the relationship was what was most important. A parent or any adult, if an adult has a positive, good, solid relationship with children, they can get children to move any kind of way, right? So I think I would also offer the advice to have children really work on building the relationships with their children. I think parents really work on building the relationships with their children right now and truly hearing them.
Yes.
Taking the time to hear and understand your child and understand your child's needs.
Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate having this discussion with you. And I just wanted to thank you guys for your time before we end this meeting, just because I know this is something that you had to take time out of your day to, and today's a Friday afternoon too, so you, plans were probably made for this. So I just really appreciate both of you for joining me on this meeting, and I guess we will be in contact soon.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you so much, Matthew and Shanelle. Thank you for having me. This is lovely, and
Absolutely.
I can never talk enough about all of this. So thank you so much.
Hey, Zenani, if people are interested in trying to find more about like you and talk to you more and catch up and get more of your tips about Calm, how do they find you? How do people reach out to you?
Oh, Let's Rest RP. .com. You can also email me at letsrestrp@gmail.com. And I am also on Facebook at Let's Rest Experience. That's my handle. And then on Instagram, I'm at Zenani116. I know that was really fast, but yeah, I'm all over the place.
Hey, so we can find you on all of the platforms. And, you know, we'll also make sure that we tag you, tag all of your information in the links, the show note information, or wherever we do that. We'll make sure that we tag you so that people can find you as well.
Perfect. Perfect. I really, really feel passionately about helping parents navigate this, because I truly believe in my heart, I'm not being a Pollyanna, I truly believe in my heart that it can be done. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, because I totally needed to hear that today. I needed to hear, I'm serious, like my kids go to school on Wednesday, and I needed to hear that I am the OOIC, like I'm the original one in charge, and that I can handle this. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
And I appreciate you.
Bye, Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys.